Okay. All right. Should be everything.
So just
Yeah, if you want to test it, you can just advance it with the key here. And that'll work.
yeah, that's easy.
Perfect. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Her mother used to work for me too. Yeah. You never know.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah. So I know in the actual building was in Florence.
I have a little speech to do, but there's so few of us. Basically, I'm Robin Raspberry. I work with Hardman Real Estate Services. I was the archive governmental affairs chair last year. And we are doing this program through an NAR rural outreach grant. And so that's how this whole program started. Our goal today is to walk away with basic knowledge of septic systems to assist you as a homeowner in protecting one of your largest investments. And we have 3 speakers this evening. Mr. Dwight Minix, is that correct? From the Kentucky Department of Public Health. Dwight graduated from Eastern Kentucky University with a bachelor's degree in soil science and has worked for the Kentucky Department for Public Health for 24 years. And prior to that, worked for the Kentucky Department of Natural Resources for 6 years. Currently, the Eastern Kentucky On-Site Sewage Program Evaluator and Technical Consultant. Thank you for being here this evening.
Right.
Do you want to start?
I'm ready. Yeah, good evening on this hot evening. 86, 88.
Yeah.
I'm not tempered into that yet. We'll keep this real informal. If I talk about something or flipping on a slide, you want to ask a question, just speak up and ask a question. There's not enough of us, it's not gonna matter. If you want to know something, just ask. And then we'll, now what, about how long are we thinking?
Whatever you need, whatever you're comfortable with. We're ending in 2 hours.
Okay,
So,
okay, well, I won't irritate. Okay, I'll go about 30 minutes or something, and then we'll have a little more discussion if we need to or whatever, 30,
That's fine.
45, is that all right? Okay. Okay, wastewater treatment, it protects the public health, prevents contact with pathogenic microorganisms such as bacteria and viruses, prevents contact with toxic chemicals, reduces the pollutants that can contaminate ground and surface waters. On-site wastewater treatment, cost-effective compared to municipal sewers. They protect the groundwater, recycles waste, recharges the groundwater, utilizes the natural filtering properties of the soil. Soil consists of 3 types of soils. There's sands, there's silts, and there's clays. And the pores in between the soil is actually what absorbs the water. The fluid flows through the soil pores. The bacteria are filtered out, viruses are absorbed and destroyed, and chemicals are retained. Okay, the treatment process, you have the pre-treatment, or what we would refer to as the septic tank. From the septic tank, the wastewater goes to the distribution box and then into the lateral field, where in the lateral field, it absorbs into the soil. The soil does its natural cleaning. And then when it passes through what we refer to as a vertical separation, it's ready for the groundwater or the wells or whatever. Each time a health department does a site evaluation, they go out and do a soil evaluation or the site evaluation. And one of the things they're looking for is actually 18-inch vertical separation, and that starts at the bottom of the trenches. And that's what actually cleans the septic water and gets it ready for the groundwater. You hear a lot of complaints out of people that say that when they see their site evaluation and they have to put in whatever, and then they're complaining, well, my neighbor didn't have to do that. Their system only cost $2,000, mine's gonna cost $7,000 or whatever. Well, every lot's different. And because it's rated on, it's the individual soil that's there and the factors. Apparently I missed one of those. I was telling Veronica, I took a bunch of those out.
Oh, did you get it?
I there at the first, but I missed that. I just cut the slide.
So
Okay.
is there one time that if you see a lot of cedar trees, that the ground is probably good to start? Is that true?
No, actually, if one of the visual indicators, if you see a lot of cedar trees, it's probably real heavy clay, probably shallow bedrock. Well,
Okay.
probably opposite.
Okay.
That's misinformation.
Either that or my head.
The pre-treatment of the septic tank provides retention time of the wastewater. The way the septic system is designed is when wastewater leaves the home or residence and it goes into a tank, it's actually supposed to stay in there that particular gallon of water. Say if we use a gallon of water, stays in that tank for 72 hours, and then it goes on out to the lateral line. And that's just retention time to let it settle out and clear up, as good as it can. It allows separation of sludge and scum before discharge to the soil absorption system. It allows bacteria to digest solids anaerobically, produces partially clarified wastewater effluent for discharge to the soil absorption system. They have inlet baffle and tees that diffuses incoming wastewater and prevents scarring and resuspension of the solids. So it's kind of the way a septic tank is set up is this, where you see it says inlet T and outlet T, there's specific measurements that those have to be. On the inlet end of a tank, it's got to be 8 to 10 inches into the liquid depth. Now, what we refer to as the liquid depth would be from the bottom of the tank to the bottom of that outlet T. That's as much of water as supposed to be able to fill up. So that's the liquid depth. So the inlet T has to be 8 to 10 inches into that. And on the outlet, it's supposed to be 35 to 40% of the liquid depth. Now the thinking is the sludge layer, that's things settle, scum layer, stuff floats. That center area there where it says clear zone, that's the cleanest water that's in that tank. That's what is allowed to leave and go out to the lateral lines. That's just showing a 2-compartment tank.
I think you should let all of them.
Apparently I did. I cut 2 or 3 slides out of the first of it, and I thought that was all of them. So anyway, minimum septic tank requirements for a 3-bedroom or less, you got to have a 1,000-gallon tank. So even if somebody's putting a 1-bedroom rental cabin or a cabin in the woods or whatever, they're still going to be required to put a 1,000-gallon tank. And then each bedroom added past 3, you add an additional 250 gallons. Or if they've got a garden disposal, you add another 250 gallons. The equal flow box, or the different types of distribution, one of them is the equal flow box. It's designed with a baffle. And when I say baffle, you see this This inlet, this would be the inlet end of this distribution box, and that's the baffle right there. And what that does is actually when the wastewater comes out of the septic tank and comes into the distribution box, it slows it down. And then it has to go down, and it comes up on this side because these are outlet holes here that actually are going to go out to the lateral lines. So it comes up slow and easy, and that way, that's why it's called an equal flow. How many ever lines you've got in that, the exact same amount of water goes out to each line. And when you do an equal flow system, each line has to be the same length within 10%. You set them on a level, stable base, and if there's and we put inside those what we call speed levelers to actually adjust the water that leaves. And when sometimes a system, we recommend that if somebody's got a failing system, one of the first things you need to check is actually check that distribution box. Because if it's an equal flow system and maybe it got off level or something or another, there may be one line getting all the water. It's filling up, not properly giving water to the other line. So we always say, take that lid off and check that first, But a lot of times that can save a lot of trouble. And I always tell people after they put the system in, within a few months, 6 months, something, they already check their box anyway. Maybe some settling or may have got knocked around after covering it up or something. Because even though they're supposed to be on a stable base, sometimes people maybe dig a little too deep and they feel back in on this now. So there's needs to be checked. Equal flow distribution, like I said, you can have several lines in that particular box. I think you could have 7, but if you needed more than 7, you could do multiple equal flow boxes for like really large systems. You can get those boxes equal flow with just 3 outlets, 4 outlets, 5, 6, or 7. Is usually the way they come. But and that's kind of hard to tell on that picture. But those lines don't run, they're not running down, they're actually level. They're running on contour. So if you took a grade shot at the end of this line right here, it's going to give you the same grade shot all the way. So you got to run them around the contour the way the ground lays, but they got to be level. Now they don't have to be level like each one of them this way. They just got to be level from their own line. So if you're on a hill slope, this row's got to be level, and then the next row's got to be level within itself, or whatever. So. Okay. Is there a volume? Is there a volume on this thing? I must have just had them turned off somewhere or another, or turned down the volume when I went over it. I thought I had it great.
Well, you could probably just turn it off on the TV.
I don't know how loud Jens was hearing it, but up here it was loud.
Yeah.
Okay. Equal flow placement. You notice as the lines are coming out of that box and going over into the trench or the lateral line, you're supposed to go into a trench with a minimum of 2 feet of solid pipe, and then you change over to your lateral line with a hose in it that actually distribute it out into the lateral line. If you're using a rock trench or a rock bed, the placement of the height of the box from the outlet over to it is important, because if you get it too low, it won't back up into the box. It may pop out of the ground. So there's the speed levelers I mentioned, and like I say, sometimes after that has to be checked initially when you put the system in and it gets inspected, and then later on, lots of times you can just take, for a failing system, you can take that lid off, and there may be some issue, and you can just take a shovel and kind of turn those levelers around and readjust that and get it going back to equal flow. A hillside box system usually has 3 outlets. Bottom of the inlet is at least 1 inch above the tops of the lateral line outlets. The bottom of the overflow outlet is level with the tops of the lateral lines. Each successive trench is filled before overflowing to the next box and trench. It results in continuous flooding of the upper lines. So like a while ago, I said on the equal flow, all lines get the same amount. You know, if you on that equal flow system, if you put 5 gallons of water in that distribution box and you've got 5 lines, they're each going to get a gallon of water all at the same time. Well, a hillside box or hillside system works differently. They don't have to be equal lines. You can have, for instance, you can have 100-foot running this way and 25-foot running this way. But these upper lines on the first box are going to completely fill up and actually fail back up into that box and then spill over the hill to the next box. So, and they're good systems and they're used, you know, in some parts of the state. I'm not a big fan, but they have their place. They absolutely have their place because there's some slopes and the way lots are and this and that hillside about you can't get a flow system. But the only thing is if these upper lines fail, the soil actually pours stop up and it gets all the way down to the bottom, how many ever tiers of land you have. Once those fail down there and come up, the system's pretty well shot. So as you can see on the inlet, water flow comes in either from the septic tank or another hillside box above it, where this one's at. And then it will fill up and it'll go to the outlet lines. And once those outlet lines fill up, it will come back, the water will back up. And actually, you notice where this overflows lower than the inlet, but it's higher than this, then it'll flow through this one down to the next hillside box. And you notice there that the different in the lengths of the rows are coming out. You can have just different, so you can pretty well suit, you can put that system in and suit the lot according to the slope and how much room you got. Okay, hillside box use and installation. They may be used on hillsides. They may not be used in sites with group 4 soils. Does not require equivalent length lateral lines and install level on a level base. Earlier when I mentioned the soils, all soils are either sand, silt, clay, or a mixture of sand, silt, and clay. When we do site evaluations, we actually are going to decide whether that system gets installed in a group 1, 2, 3, or 4 soil. And that determines on how large the system is and what components and this, that get put in. Naturally, group 4 soils, they're heavier clay soils, and you've got to have more lateral line. Not that, I mean, clay soil is excellent for actually cleaning up septic water, but it takes it longer because the soil pores are so small, and you got to have more storage room. So actually, you got to have more lateral lines to hold it while it is soaking into the ground. The placement of the box, just showing about how high it is or how low, because if you put it too high, it may pop out of the ground before it backs up into the box. If you place it too low, that whole lateral line that it's actually feeding may not completely be full. Because these lateral lines, if we're talking about just conventional rock trenches, and that's the way every system gets sized originally on a 2-foot gravel trench. And then we do calculations and go from 2-foot gravel trench, that's the conventional system. We'll go to either chamber system or a rock bed system or a chamber bed system or whatever. But you're going to know the actual conventional rock is 2 foot wide That's 2 foot wide, 12 inches of rock deep, and then however long, linear feet you have. So if the box is too high, instead of being able, if that trench gets full of water, it may pop out of the ground and you're going to see a failure. If it's too low, it's going back into the box, spill on over the hill before the whole 12 inches of the trench was actually full. So proper placement is really important in a hillside system. The piping, non-perforated piping for gravity flow used for carriage or effluent between the septic tanks in a series, between pretreatment units and distribution boxes, and it must extend 2 feet into the lateral trenches. And we identify this solid piping. It's in the component regs. It's got the ASTM numbers and this and that. And we can use schedule 35 and schedule 40 for septic systems. And there's another number or two that we can use for some lateral lines. Okay, leaching chambers. I don't know if everybody knows what a leaching chamber is. That's those big black plastic things, and they're kind of dome shaped, come in like 4 or 5 foot sections, and you snap them together. We've got a picture of them here in a minute or two. People tend to use them because they save some space on the linear footage. Sometimes on real small areas that you don't have a room to put a conventional gravel trench system in, you may be able to get a chamber system in, or a chamber bed system. Well, they have to support 600 pounds square feet on the top. They must provide sidewall openings. They must be interlocking. They must be provided with end plates, must be provided with inspection ports, must be marked with the manufacturer's name and assigned serial number. And that's actually some rows of leaching chambers that's actually been laid in, and that's kind of showing. See, those are level from end all the way through. Each one of them is snapped in. They're level within that trench. So you can see when I mentioned sometimes, where systems have to be laid around the contour, that's the way the ground is actually level. You can kind of see it sweeping around. So if an installer puts a transit anywhere on that, like in that first row that we're looking at there, you're going to get the same grade shot throughout it. Now that don't mean it has to be the same grade shot as the next down, but the next one down has to have the same grade shot within that. And that appears to be a hillside drop system, because I'm seeing multiple boxes there. I don't know exactly where that picture came from, so. That's actually a leaching chamber bed. Those chambers come the single row, the single one, they're 3 foot wide. So we consider that a single row. But anything wider than 3 foot in chambers, we're going to consider it a bed. And those chambers come 3 foot, 2 foot, and 1 foot. So you can have combinations of, you can have a 3 foot single row, or you can have a 4 foot bed all the way up to 12. Regulations stop us at 12 feet. That's as wide as a bed, whether it's chamber bed or a gravel bed. That's as wide as we can go. Now, linear, we can go up to 200 feet. The thing of it is, most people don't live to where they can have a 200 foot consecutive, one row or whatever. It's got to be broke up. And I'm a fan personally of more rows, shorter lengths. They seem to work better. And probably 20 years ago, if you'd asked me, I'd have said, and I'm not trying to knock leaching chambers or anything, they have their place, they're a real good product, but I was really high on them. But over the years, a good gravel bed, good 4 or 6 foot gravel bed is a hard system to beat. And they're just really, you don't have to worry about people tearing them up. They're just a hard system to beat. And we tend to, you'll see more chambers installed in counties that don't have rock quarries right in the same county. Like if the guys have to truck the rock from a county or two away, or the price goes up, they may use chambers. And then other side of that, you'll see more gravel beds or conventional lateral trench in counties where rock is easily available. Soil absorption lines, many different types of absorption systems are in use. Effluent is treated by exposure to soil bacteria. 90 to 95% of the effluent is disposed of by soil absorption. Most systems are variations of conventional rock lateral fill. The design of the conventional rock, maximum 200 feet in length, 2 foot wide, spaced 8 feet from center to center. That means if you've got multiple rows here, they have to be 8 feet from the center of the rock on the first row. The next row has to be a minimum of 8 feet. So that actually in turn gets you 6 feet of solid ground in between if you go 8 feet from center to center. The maximum depth, and when I say maximum depth, we're referring to the bottom of the trench. That's where the gravel is put in, where the gravel meets the soil. That's 24 inches. And there's no, that's the maximum. And the thinking of, if it's any more than that, then there's not going to be enough air in the soil to actually give the wastewater proper treatment. So not a lot of systems get to go, well, I shouldn't say that, but a high percentage of systems have to be put in less than 24 inches. Because I mentioned earlier that we're looking for that 18 inches underneath that bottom of that trench. If you think of it this way, if you go 24 inches deep, that's the bottom of the trench. Well, then we're needing 18 inches of good usable soil. When you add that up, that's 42 inches. That's what a health department, when they actually come out to do a site evaluation, they're going to want to look at 42 inches of soil. Now, of course, if they hit some kind of restriction, massive soil or rock before that 42, that's all they're going to get to use. So sometimes you will see systems that go in that's quite a bit less than 24 inches, and then they got to be extra soil put over them and stuff. And all these factors, like I say, there's very few systems that two systems are identical. I mean, there's a little something different. There's a lot of systems that gets the same components put in, but when you look at that site evaluation on the depths of where the soil started and other factors, because there's several factors that we look at when we do a site evaluation. There's not a lot of systems that's identical. Now, gravel has to have a minimum of 10 inches of soil on top of it after the system's put in, and that's a minimum of 10 inches of backfill. So ideally, if you've got perfect conditions, you can put your gravel in at 24 inches deep, cover that trench over, you're going to have 12 inches over it. Well, that's okay. You know, a minimum of 10. You don't want more than 12. Then people don't have to haul extra soil or move extra soil from one place to another to fill on over it. So ideally, that's, if you've got a trench depth of 24 inches, you're in good shape. That's just showing the 2 foot wide, 200 feet long, 8 feet from center to center. That's just showing the cross section of a lateral line. That down there in this area here, when it shows that's 12 inches of gravel that's 24 inches wide. Well, when these are installed, you lay down 6 inches of gravel, you put your 4-inch perforated pipe on it, and then you put another 6 inches of gravel for a total of 12. So actually that pipe that's in that lateral line is going to be 2 inches underneath the top of the gravel. And then when the water comes from the distribution box into that pipe, it distributes it out into the gravel. And then that wastewater goes into the gravel, it gets some treatment there, then it actually starts soaking into the soil. And as it filters through the soil, that's where it gets clean, ready for the groundwater. That's showing like when the lines are covered over, it's good to kind of heap them up a little bit, because if you don't, if you try to fix that dressed out right when it's done, a homeowner just in a month or a few weeks, they'll be hot. Well, I've got trenches, I've got valleys in my yard here. What we're going to do, you know? So it's better to have it heaped up a little bit than it always. If it don't settle down, they can always drag it around a little or something. That's just basically talking about the same thing I was talking about there. Yeah, the pipe coming, this pipe here would be coming from the distribution box, and it actually needs to go, it don't need to be put into loose ground. When this is buried, the trench going over to the lateral line just needs to be buried enough for it to set on solid. This needs to be undisturbed here. And then of course that 18-inch vertical separation distance. That is the key to a septic system of getting the water clean, is that vertical separation distance. You hear people talk all the time about, oh, I want a green system, and these companies will all got the greenest, newest, best thing there was. Well, there is no greener septic system than a regular traditional system, because what's more natural than the soil, through natural properties, cleaning the ground, the wastewater, and getting it ready for the groundwater or whatever. There is nothing more natural than that. That's just showing a rock bed. And when I say a rock bed, anything, if it's gravel, anything wider than 2 foot up to 12 is going to be considered a bed. And a bed system will give you less linear footage. They're actually a space saver, because beds will usually take up a smaller fingerprint, square footage, you know, than actually a 2 foot conventional. So sometimes you can get some type of bed system in on a site to where you couldn't get a regular conventional system. This one happens to be 4 feet wide. Soil profile and exposed cutter section that includes the collection of all the genetic horizons, the natural organic layers of the surface, the parent material or other layers beneath the soil that influence the genesis and the behavior of the soil. That's a pit looking at the profile of the soil, and that was probably dug 42 inches. They are, I don't know the percentage on it, but there's a lot of the counties, or a high percentage of the counties now, have mandatory backhoe pits when they do a site evaluation. And it should be. Using that old bucket auger, you do a lot of guessing. And sometimes health departments will have to even look at the homeowner and they say, well, I may have to turn this site down, or it may not be as bad as I'm seeing with this auger, but if you get me some pits out here, you know, we take a look at it. And if a health department goes to a site that's been altered in any way, well, then the regulation for back. Soil morphology in general includes field examination, description, and characterization of soils, landscapes, and their patterns of occurrences on the surface of the earth, both internal and external properties. Water tables, we got an example of a seasonal or a permanent water table. There's things that we look at and we identify to know there's a perched water table. And there's soil indicators called modeling of the soil. And that's something that the health department inspectors, when they do the site evaluation, and that determines on the components that go in a homeowner's system, and whether or not they got to have what we refer to as a curtain drain, or can they stay off of that. There's a lot of different things to that. Hard pan, or usually clay-rich layer of soil, which soil particles are cemented together in silica, iron oxide, calcium carbonate. Hard pans do not soften when exposed to water. We can't use, you can't put a septic system on a hard pan or in clay, massive clay soil. If you do, it's going to fail. Once your lateral lines fill up, the water has nowhere to go. It's going to fail. It's going to back up or pop out on top of the ground. And the one thing when we talk about a failing system, I've heard it said often. People say, well, my system's been in for 40 years and I ain't never had a bit of trouble. Well, they probably haven't, because in their mind, they're not seeing anything coming on top of the ground and this and that. But it's untelling how deep it was. It's probably not getting, it may not be getting any treatment. It's getting into the groundwater. Well, that's a failure. But that's not a failure that they're having to look at. So that's the one with the health department inspector's job. That's one of the hardest things to do, is try to make a homeowner understand why they're having to do, A, B, and C to put a septic system. And it's not because that inspector's mad at them that day. It's just that's the way it is, because of the soil conditions. Our soils in Kentucky are generally described as natural medium for the growth of land plants, whether or not there has been development of soil horizons. Each soil profile is an end product of the action of several factors, including climate, living organisms, mainly vegetation, topography, lay of the land, parent material, and time. The results of the action of the first four factors over a period of time determine the kind of soil at any one place. In Kentucky, almost all soils except stream deposits may develop under forest cover and essentially the same climate. Therefore, the resulting differences among soils are due chiefly to difference in parent material, topography, and the length of time they have been exposed to weathering and the soil forming process. Soil structure and water movement. When we talk about soil structure, we refer to it as single grain, granular, blocky, prismatic, platy, massive. Single grain sand will flow through your fingers, even when wet. I like to think of single grain sand. If you go to the beach, pick up some sand, you crack your fingers a little bit, sand just goes filtering through, falling through. We don't want that for a septic system. Because actually, if you think about it, when that wastewater comes out of those lateral lines and it hits material like that, it just falls through it and it don't get any treatment. So, but we don't do a lot of site evaluations in single grain sands, but granular, the structure is dark in color due to the high organic matter found in surface horizons, usually very permeable and porous, subjected to most weathering. That's an example of granular soil. You see it's just little small beds. Blocky would be more larger in size, some of it clean together. That's an example of granular, and that would be probably small blocky and then maybe larger blocky. We're just going to call it blocky, but prismatic soil has vertical planes of weakness, usually found in fragipans. Very slow permeability, water or effluent can only pass through planes of weakness. That's a picture of a fragipan. That's a above view. And you notice these streaks and circles that's the area that actually that the water is actually going down through that soil. So if a prismatic soil, if that's associated, if it's because of a fragipan, then none of the rest of that soil will actually accept water. So we treat that as a restrictive horizon, and we got to deal with it. We got to stay off of it or whatever. Massive soils found mostly in high clay content soils in the lower horizons, restricts downward water movement. You've probably all seen some massive soil, just big chunks. Massive soil just doesn't soak up the water. Or if it soaks up any, it's such a small amount at a slow period of time that it just doesn't work for septic systems. The high shrink swell clay, that's another one. You know, that's a no when it comes to septic systems. Just some other example of massive. So we do have some areas that their site evaluation may be done, and maybe there's a little massive or compactive on top. Say for instance, some of the hay fields been mowed year after year after year. Well, there may just be a little massive or something there. Well, in our regulations, there's actually things we can do to actually take care of that, as long as it's not too deep and not have to turn that site down. The vertical separation is the depth of permeable unsaturated soil that exists between the bottom of the lateral trenches. And some restrictive or limiting layer or features such as a water table, bedrock, hardpan, acceptable fine textured soils, or excessively permeable material. Restrictive horizon is the Kentucky regulations try to maintain an 18-inch vertical separation distance from the bottom of the lateral bed to the top of any restrictive horizon. A 12 to 17 separation distance may be used. I don't even like to talk about that, because if I can get an 18-inch vertical separation, that's what I want, because that's going to clean the water better. But if a health department has to go to that, then there's additional things they can require on that system to make up the difference. Talked a little bit about curtain drains and I'm trying to not get too, okay, state and local on-site roads. The state staff, which is what I do, and Krista, she works south central area. Well, I should have introduced you there a while ago. Actually, I didn't even see you until we got started, but anyway. There's four of us across the state. We have a variety of roles. That map there is not exactly up to date. We train all new people that the health departments are in the on-site. We do, second opinions, problem sites, help out health departments when we can, or homeowners. If a homeowner calls and says, well, I don't like what the health department's done, can you give me a second opinion? Yeah, we can, we do. I don't like to do that. And I go along with whatever the health department says, unless they, maybe didn't go to a certain area or missed something or whatever. But the one enjoyable part of my job is when somebody calls and say they need help, maybe a lot too small or bad soil conditions or something other, and I can go out and spend a day and actually figure out a way that homeowner can get assistance. That's pretty enjoyable to me. All the other complaints and the problems is not much fun. We conduct field inspections for component manufacturers. That's the concrete precasters, all the advanced treatment units. We review new components. We develop the annual installer trainings. We serve members of environmental strike team, plan review, available for questions, service hearing officers, problem solving for citizen complaints, and many more. Where the local health department, they actually, when somebody needs a septic system put in, that's who you're going to go to and fill out a site application and get a site evaluation done, and then a homeowner can once they get the site evaluation, they'll hire an installer, you know, or the homeowner will talk it over with the installer and they get hired. And eventually, when the installer gets a permit, the health department inspector will tell them to go ahead and put it in. And then when the installer gets it in, they'll call the inspector and say, I need a final approval. And he'll come out and go through all these things that we talked about. The finals, they do complaint investigations and legal proceedings. And I don't want to make it sound like that's shortchanging on what they do, because the health departments do. How many programs do y'all do? 10 or 12? Yeah, I mean, I only do on-site. That's, you know, that's all I do. And you all wear a lot of hats. It's, you know, and just the on-site alone, if you're in a county that's, you know, doing any building or anything, it gets crazy. Northern Kentucky, this is a fee schedule. I'll let some of you all talk about that, because I'm not that familiar with these counties here. My experience is, according to which county you're in, you're probably going to be somewhere for a site evaluation and a permit. You're probably going to be somewhere between $250 and $400 or $500. It varies from county to county. I think we'll just open it up for questions here, and I've got other things, but we can go to midnight, but I don't want to. So that's so. Any questions?
You said that the chambers are used for space saving.
Yeah. Space saving. They're less labor. The individual installer can pretty well put a chamber system in by themselves. They're doing that to spread all that gravel. But cost wise, like I say, I think gravel usually, I'm just talking after most installers, if the gravel is within the county and they're not having to hire it all, you know, 2 or 3 counties away, they'll go with the gravel.
And so where I live, there's 3 laundries,
So
so.
yeah, so you
No,
probably,
don't see changes.
you'll see a lot of gravel.
Like we only.
That's the way it is. That's the way it is all across the state.
Those Lincoln County, said they did like all those chambers.
I bet they don't have a rock work.
To get one. They did the chambers. The chambers are super high riley.
Right.
Rock everywhere.
I know we gotta have more questions than that. No questions.
Myself, I'm just a little overwhelmed. I've never seen it all like that, so it's like.
Yeah, and that's just barely, I mean, that's just barely, you know. Yeah, that is the site evaluation form. The health department fills out and they can do that. It's got 12 or 13 evaluation factors that they have to go through and fill out, and then they combine all that. That's how they decide. Well, it's not they decide, that's how the regulation decides as a second.